All right. Welcome to the Passion Project podcast with Ramiro and nobody. I don't have a guest today, so I brought on my producer extraordinaire, Mustafa Ben Salah, and I figure I would. He goes by Moose, by the way, like the animal. I figure I would with this one I would explain why I'm doing. What type of guests and stuff like that I'm looking for, why I'm doing this podcast, which, by the way, who knows, I might, as it goes on, I might change it up or whatever. Right now, as we're speaking today, the reason I'm doing it is because, I've always wanted to do a podcast, but I could never think of, I didn't just want to go out there and just talk about whatever, even though I like doing stream of consciousness stuff, but I still wanted kind of a starting point, I guess. So I started thinking about myself, and I'm like, what am I into when it comes to other people? Like, what do I like about other people? And the one thing that usually right away gets me going with somebody is some sort of interesting story about themselves. I actually love it when people are self-deprecating. You know what? That's my thing. When people are self-deprecating and they kind of tell a story where they goof on themselves, I immediately connect. Whenever people don't do that, there's a layer of disconnect for some reason. I'm like, come on, man. Stop acting like you're perfect. Everybody messes up, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, but then when I get to know people and they start telling me their stories, everybody has a story. Everybody has an interesting story, I should say. The most interesting people that I know, that I've met, don't have I grew up and my family loved me and everything was great. And then I went to high school and I went on to college and studied business. And then I got into blah, 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 blah. And now here I am with my wife and 2 kids. That's not fun. I like when people have like struggle, and everyone does if you think about it. Or at least you assume that everyone does. So, and especially people who are successful in what they do, because those people have the most. A lot of people will see the end product and go, oh, this person's whatever, running this company, or they're kicking ass in this field. And they think that they were born that way and were kicking ass all the way. I'm just going to give an example of an athlete, because that's easy to relate to. You see like an awesome athlete and you're like, oh, he was just awesome at basketball his entire life. He was born. He was 6'2" by the time he was like 9 years old. Of course. No, there's more to it. There's way more to it. And when you really get down to talking to the person, you see at what point in their life they decided to go the direction that they wanted to go in. Sometimes it's super early because, growing up, they were just always exposed to something. And they were like, well, that's just what I always knew. So I went in that direction. Sometimes it happens later on. Some people switch careers as they go along. But I just love people's stories. So I'll tell you, I'll give you an example. I'll give you my story.
I know. I'm so curious. I feel like I know it, but I'm so curious to hear the deep stuff.
Okay, so my story. I love radio. Radio is the one thing I am hardcore passionate about. Just every opportunity that I've ever had in my career, first of all, has come from radio. I've been doing it for freaking more than half my life. But every opportunity that I've ever had, I've always been like, well, I'm either going to do it or not do it, or do it only do it a certain way because of radio. Like, I never wanted to mess with my schedule, and my schedule is freaking crazy. I get up at 2 a.m, But, okay, so how did I get into radio? I'll tell you my story. All right, so let's see. Moose, how old are you?
24.
24. Shit. You probably don't remember. I mean, it's still on now. NFL Primetime. Do you know that show?
Yeah.
You a sports guy?
Yeah.
It's like an NFL recap show. So anyway,
I think it's called something else now, but yeah.
It's on ESPN. I don't even know if they do it anymore. And if they do, it's not as good as it used to be. When I was younger, that was my favorite show outside of like wrestling or something like that. But it was like my favorite show on TV. And it was an NFL highlight show. And the main dude was Chris Berman and Tom Jackson. And I would watch that show And one day it just hit me, and I was like, why do I love... There's like 10 different NFL recap shows. Excuse me, let me get rid of my gum. On Sundays. But I love this show. This is the show that I'm like, I'm looking forward to this show. It wasn't because I did love football, the sport, but it's not because I was like, oh, it's all about football. It just hit me one day. I love the way that they delivered the highlights, because they wouldn't just say, oh, and the Patriots beat the Steelers, blah, 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 blah. Tom Brady threw for 3 touchdowns. They would present each game like a story, and they would give the players nicknames, and they would do sound effects. If they fumbled, they'd go, whoop, fumble. They'd present the game, even if it was a freaking blowout, if it was a game that was like 45-10, as they're telling you the story of the game, they made it seem like the team that's getting smoked by 30 points somehow still has a chance to win. It was just, when that show was at its height, it was amazing. So anyway, that's like, when I made that connection of why I love that show, I was like, I want to do something like that highlights my personality. And then I started thinking about it, and over time I was like, okay, well, you could do like TV, or you could do like a comedian, or radio. I like radio too. And by the way, this is before like the internet, where you can Google shit and be like, oh, how's this? Whatever. How do you get into this? I was going by, and I didn't know anybody in any of those businesses. So I was just kind of like in my head figuring these things out. I might even have written it down one time, but I was like, okay, so between those 3, which do I think I'd be really good at? And I ended up with radio, because in my head, with zero, like, nobody to like talk about it or anything. I didn't even like talk to anybody about it at the time, like any friends or anything. In my head, I was like, okay, well, for TV shows, I know they read scripts. I don't really want to read a script. I don't know if I could read a script. I don't want to read lines. Not knowing years later down the road, the shows like The Office and all those shows where it was more like ad-libbing and stuff, I think I would have kicked ass in those shows for some reason. I really do.
Yeah, some improv stuff.
Yeah, do you ever see the show Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Yeah, that show's so...
Oh, my God.
You would kill it on that.
I feel... when I saw... I used to see that show, and I'd be like, I feel like I'd be good at this show. It's coming up with stuff on the spot. You kind of playing off of other people. But anyway, at the time, I wasn't thinking about that. I was just like, oh, you're reading scripts. And I'm like, you got to play a character. So I really wasn't feeling that. And then for comedy, I was like, oh, comedy seems fun. But again, with zero evidence or nobody that I knew that was into comedy, I should have like gone to a comedy show and maybe spoken to someone. I don't know. I didn't even think about doing that. I was like, okay, well, I'd have to write down my routine. And I feel like they do the same routine probably for like, I don't know, 4 to 6 months, just going to different cities, maybe changing up a few things. I know anybody who's a comedian is like, that's not how it works, idiot. But that's what I thought.
You were naive. You didn't know.
I was super naive. Yeah. And again, I didn't have anybody to... When I tell you like I was naive, I was dead set against going to college, because I thought college was a place that you went to be a doctor or a lawyer. That's it. So I was like, I don't want to do either of those things. Why am I going to go to college?
So how old were you during this? Were you...
So I was probably... This was like maybe like 9, 10. So probably about 15, 16 around there is when I started thinking about it a little. I mean, it was probably like maybe like... No, it was probably about 8th or 9th grade when I kind of made the connection of that. And then like... This was a process. It wasn't like over a weekend,
Yeah.
It was like doing that, dicking around. Yeah. And every now and then you think about your future. And I'm like, oh, what am I going to do in the future? Yeah. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. You know what it was? Everything I saw in my life, I didn't know what I wanted to do before like I kind of started figuring it out. I just knew that I would see, the way people live their lives, and I was like, I know I don't want to do this. I don't know what else there is, because you only see a certain thing. So that's all you're only being exposed to certain things. So that's all you think life is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I thought life was, you get a job nearby to where you work, you do your 9 to 5 or whatever, and then you come home. Like I thought, from everybody who I knew, they all had jobs, not careers. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense.
You know, and like 90% of like the males, the older males in my life, they worked at like a factory, an auto body shop, and I really wasn't into that.
Yeah.
So, but in my head, I was like, oh, I guess I'll be, I don't know, maybe a trash guy. At least I won't be like stuck in one place. I never wanted to be stuck in one place. It was weird.
Yeah.
I just always pictured a job like somebody going and being in an office or being like in one location, like the auto mechanic, and just being there all day. And again, even though that's what I thought life was, I was like, I don't want to do that. But
so go back to tell me. You said did you start writing? You saying like, you thought comedians at the time, they did the same bit for 45 months.
Yeah, no. So that's why I kind of ruled out that.
Yeah.
I didn't know how much went into radio. I literally thought at first it was just like, oh, you just go in and have fun and talk about different stuff every day.
Yeah.
There's more to it, but that's what I thought. So that's why I was like, oh, that at least in my head, just you don't know certain things about yourself, or you know certain things about yourself, but only to a certain extent at a certain age.
Yeah.
It's just because in my head, all I was thinking was, at least that won't be boring to me.
Yeah.
Because every day will be different. So that's kind of what drove me to radio. And so once I made that decision, then I think I started talking to people about it, because I remember that when I really made the decision, because again, I didn't want to go to college. I was like, why am I going to go to college? I want to be on the radio. What? I don't understand why do this to get into radio. So I remember I was in high school. It was like a study period, and I was hanging out with a friend of mine, Quentin, and he pulls out like a pamphlet.
Tarantino?
Definitely not Quentin Tarantino. This Quentin was black. So it wasn't that one.
Some might argue Quentin Tarantino is though.
Yeah. So he had like a pamphlet to this place called the Northeast Broadcasting School, and he wanted to be like a DJ, like a mixed DJ, like do events. And he showed me that, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go here," or he was thinking about going there, and I'm looking at it, and it was a place that was. It was like a 9-month program or 8-month. It was September to May or what. It's the same. It was like another year of high school. Mm-hmm. But it was radio and TV. And I was like, let me see that. That's where I want to go. So that's where I ended up going. And when I went there, it's funny, like in retrospect, thinking about it, like all my parents' friends, my aunts and all that stuff, they were like, he wants to do what? He's so quiet. He's so shy. He doesn't talk. But it's like, really? Why? Yeah, but I'm also like, I would talk if I was comfortable with you, like with my friends. I'm not going to get all familiar and comfortable with like an aunt. You only talk to them a certain way. They're older than you, But
it's interesting.
Yeah. So my parents, even though they weren't the most encouraging parents, they weren't bad. They just weren't like encouraging. They were more. They just tried to like. They were actually, if anything, discouraging. Don't do this because this will happen. Don't do this. Don't try that because this will happen. They never were like, oh, you know what? Do this. It's going to be tough, but I believe in you. But in their defense, I never exactly was the most driven kid either. I wasn't. I just like hung around with my friends. I figured out. In school, I figured out the pattern to get good grades. It was just remember the stuff that they're telling you right now, regurgitate it like in 2 weeks on a test, then you could leak it out of your brain and just, repeat that cycle.
Wash, rinse, repeat, yeah.
Yeah, wash, rinse, repeat. Pick up the new information.
Yeah.
2-3 weeks later, regurgitate, let it leak, and pick up the new information.
Yeah.
So, like, even with that, I was never, a crazy, like I got good grades, but it wasn't because I was this like crazy, like study freak or anything like that. It's just like, it's just like you figured out the pattern. But, so anyway, when I said I want to do this, my parents, I think they a little bit were like, oh, something that he's interested in. And they were just like, fuck it, go for it. So I ended up going to this school, and it was for 4 months. It was 8 months. So for 4 months you did radio and TV, and it was literally learning equipment, things like that. And I remember in those 4 months, I actually, for a little bit, I was like, oh, this TV behind the scenes stuff was cool. like the working the boards and doing all the shit that you can do now on your phone on on iMovie. There was like a board like this big and with all these different switches. That was kind of cool, but I still really enjoyed the radio stuff. So then after 4 months, you kind of decided, you're like, all right, I'm either going to go TV and just do all TV stuff or radio, all radio stuff. So I did all radio stuff. And at that time, too, is when you could start doing internships. So I saw they had a bulletin board. Again, this is pre-internet. This is 1994.
The year of our Lord.
Yes. It wasn't pre-internet, but it was like everybody having internet access, you know? So there was a bulletin board, and it had an internship. It had internships for different places. And what you were supposed to do was write the number down, you know, on a piece of paper, and then on your own contact the place and stuff like that. And there was one for jamming. And I forgot to say before I even went to broadcasting school, I remember I used to call radio stations and ask for a job. Because I thought that's what you did. I thought you were like, oh, can I get an application? Like if you were going to work at an ice cream shop.
Yeah.
And I would call different radio stations and I'd be like, hey, you know, can I get an application? How do I get a job? And they were all like, what? And they would be like, who are you or whatever? And I would tell them, I'm like, oh, I'm 18 and I'm in high school. But I live right down the street, you know. So then they were like, no, you need an internship. And I was like, what's an internship? I didn't know what it was. And they explained it to me. They were like, well, you come here and you work and you learn, but you do it for free. So I was like, all right, I could do that. And they said, well, no, you can't just come in, though. You need to be getting some sort of credit. And that's when I started looking for schools and stuff, because I was like, crap, how am I going to get in there? You know, how am I going to get credit? How am I going to get it so I can get credit to get in there? So that's when I went to broadcast school. So now I see the thing for jamming, the internship.
94.5. It's a radio station in Boston.
Yeah. So again, I was supposed to like write it down and leave it for other people and call it on my own. I took the thing off the freaking bulletin board. I folded it. I stuck it in my pocket. I was like, fuck everybody else. I'm going to get this thing. And when I tell you I called so much, Moose, I called them daily asking for the internship dude. And he was always either unavailable, so I leave him a voicemail, or you can call back later. Just, I was never able to get through to him. But I called so much that me and the receptionist, I would call and he'd pick up the phone. His name is Bruce. He's still my boy to this day.
Really?
He's still my boy to this day because we became friends.
Yeah.
Because I would call so much and he'd pick it up and he'd go, Jammin' 94.5, this is Bruce. How can I help you? He was the receptionist. And I'd be like, hi, I'm looking. And he'd recognize my voice and go, oh, Ramiro, hold on. Let me see if Pete's available for you today. Yeah. And he'd put me on hold and stuff. So we ended up becoming friends that way.
Yeah.
So anyway, one day, I couldn't even tell you. I called for like weeks. One day, you know, he puts me through. And I was like, here we go again with the voicemail. I'm going to leave a message. Blah, blah, blah. The dude, Pete, picks up. And I was like, hi, it's Ramiro. I've been calling. He goes, just show up tonight at 6. Yeah. And he basically hung up the phone.
Wow.
Yeah. So I showed up at the radio station. It was an intern for the night show. His name was Ralphie Marino, who I'm still boys with to this day, too. And when I got there, I was about to walk in the studio, and he was walking the opposite way in the hallway. And he looks at me and goes, who are you? And I was like, Ramiro, who are you? And he goes, I'm Ralphie. I'm like, oh, I'm your intern. And he goes, you are? And I said, yeah. And he goes, I wish fucking Pete would tell me these things in advance. And he walked in the studio and closed the door. I stayed. I almost went home. What did you do? I almost went home. I was like, I don't know what to do right now. So I kind of just like waited a little bit, and then I walked in, and we just started talking and stuff. And it's funny because at the time there was, think about this, because Moose was on the street team here at the station I'm at now. We don't even have interns anymore.
Yeah.
At the time, I was one of 3 interns just for the night show. So there was me. There was this dude, we used to call him Pretty Boy Mark, because he just wanted to hook up with girls. And he'd like pick up girls on the request line and try and hook up with them. He didn't care about anything. He literally just wanted to get laid. And this other guy, Anthony, who was a good guy, but he was a dude. He was interning there he was there for months, maybe even a year, and he was also on air at a small radio station in Providence. So I was like, how am I gonna freaking stick out with these guys? Because I thought everybody kind of wanted it like me. you realize over the years that everyone's different.
Yeah, seriously.
Everyone's just different. And as the I mean, you know that
that's
too.
a whole other topic, anyways.
Yeah. Well, you know that. I mean, yeah, you know, you'll say to me about things that you want, and you know, you could tell that other people are just like, they come in to do their job and leave, and no one's necessarily always thinking about, you know, the bigger picture. But at the time, I thought everybody kind of was like me, so I was like, oh man, this sucks. I'm the new guy. How am I gonna stick out? But as time went on, I started noticing, you know, Ralphie would be. This is before everything was like digital too. We did a lot of like when we we were getting into the digital age, but not fully there. So we would record our commercials and stuff like that on these things called carts, which you probably don't even remember. Have you ever seen an 8-track tape?
Nope.
It looks like. Hold on, I'm gonna show you right now.
Imagine like a cassette tape.
A cassette tape? No, this thing could eat a cassette tape.
Okay.
It was. This is what they used to.
8-track.
8-track. Ready? This is what it looked like. Look at the size of this fucking thing.
So you would record on that? How would that work?
So it looked like that. It was called a cart. We'd record on the machine. You'd have to kind of like almost like a play record type of situation. It wasn't like digital, just like upload.
Okay.
You had to like hit record on the machine and then hit play from the other machine and record it.
Okay.
So now, Ralphie he'd have like back then, like the jocks had to like record commercials and voice commercials and do stuff. So they'd be on air, then they'd get off air and they'd have a bunch of production to do. He didn't want to do it. So he'd be like, you guys someone do my production. So Pretty Boy Mark, like I noticed that he just wanted to get laid. He didn't care about actually learning anything. So he would always be like, nah, I got to get out of here right after, blah, 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 blah. And Anthony, he had a little more of the attitude of, I've been here for a while. Let the new kid do it. So anyway, it fell on me. Now here's the thing. I didn't know how to freaking do this stuff. So Ralphie asked me, he's like, do you know how to do it? And I lied and said yes, even though I didn't know how to do it. So I would go into the other studio, and the way the studios were set up was kind of like this, where the jock is facing a window into another studio that's facing back at you. So I'm in the other studio facing back at him in front of a computer screen at the machine, staring at it, not knowing what the hell I'm doing. So I'm literally like looking at it like this, like all confused, trying to figure it out. And when I would see out of the corner of my eye that he'd look over at me, I would look mad confident and act like I'm doing it. But anyway, long story short, after a while, you kind of like just through trial and error, I figured out how to do it. So now he's automatically, as months are going by, he's just kind of giving me the production and stuff like that. And you know, as time went by, Pretty Boy Mark just like went away. That wasn't what he was interested in. And then Anthony was also he was running the board for other shows, for weekend shows, early Sunday mornings, late Sunday nights, stuff like that. So I asked him on my own one day, I said, hey, can I come in one day and watch you do that? And it was like an early Sunday morning show. And he goes, yeah, but I think it started at 5. And I was like, all right, cool. He goes, all right. So that next Sunday, I was there probably like at 4:30, just waiting. He strolls in like at 4:59, 58. And he goes, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I want to watch you do this. And he goes, damn, man, you came early. And I was like, yeah, I'm interested in this. So now I'm just going in there Sunday mornings and then Sunday nights and watching him, on my own time, by the way, watching him run the board for these different shows. So what happened from that was one day he got a gig somewhere. I forget where it was. And instead of being like, oh, we need somebody to do this show, we need to get someone to apply or whatever. When he left, I was like, hey, I know how to do that stuff. And they were like, all right, you start doing it. So now I'm running the board. Now I'm making a little bit of money just from being there. This is part of my story of like just showing up and learning. I always try and tell people this stuff. I'm like, you got to give it time though. Your generation, man, got no patience. You got to let them marinate a little bit. You know, you can't go in a week and be like, oh, I want to be vice president. So now I'm doing this. And at the same time, the whole time, every time I'm at the radio station, when I'm interning during the week or when I'm running the board, I would always spend a little time either before or after or both and just make audition tapes in the other studio, practicing, you know? So now when I graduated broadcasting school. So I was sending out, tapes to different radio stations and stuff like that, not knowing the way that it's supposed to work, or it was supposed to work back then, was you don't get a gig in Boston's a big market. You're not supposed to be on air in a big market, where you always start off in a small market, doing weekends or overnights, and you work your way up eventually. And after like 10 years of hard work, you'll make it to the big market. I didn't know that. So I'm sending all my tapes and stuff to like all these big market radio stations, New York and LA and all that shit. And I forget who it was that told me. They were like, listen, here's the thing. You send the tape, right? And then it's so different than it is now, because so much now is like Indeed and you upload your resume. Back then you would call, or they'd call you. So they said, here's the beauty of you working at Jammin' in Boston. You send your tape to these radio stations. And I would send to like big cities, but also like some medium type cities, not super small, some medium type cities, like in Orlando, Florida, stuff like that. And they said, when you call them up after like a week or two, and all you say is, you ask for the program director, and when they say, who is it, you say, it's Ramiro calling from Jammin' in Boston. And they're gonna take your call because you're calling from a big radio station. They don't care about the name. All they hear is the Jammin' in Boston. They hear the city.
Yeah.
Half of these fucking dudes think that you're calling thinking about hiring them.
Yeah.
So I would call and do that. Yo, do you know how many freaking people? I would get through to everybody.
Yeah.
Nobody gave me a job, but I got through to all, and they would all answer the phone so enthusiastic.
Yeah.
They'd be like, hello, this is whatever. And I'm like, hey, my name is Ramiro from Boston. Yeah. You're calling from Jammin' in Boston? I said, yeah, I sent you a tape. You could hear the energy, even though it was on the over.
Deplete.
Deplete.
Yeah.
Like, this motherfucker got me.
Yeah.
No, I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet. Or they'd say, oh yeah, I heard it. You got to get a little more experience, whatever, click. But I got through to everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody. There was one dude that I sent, because I did send to some smaller markets, and for the most part, so the people who, if I couldn't get through to them on the phone, a lot of them, some just didn't contact me or whatever. Some guys would send me like a nice, like a form letter that that's like just a letter they have, and they would add in the person's name or whatever. And it would say, oh, thank you for applying for this, but right now we're full, or something like that. That's cool. There was a dude in Exeter, New Hampshire, market, I couldn't even, for 900, I don't fucking know, middle of fucking nowhere. He sent me a handwritten postcard, Moose. A postcard, personalized to me. I still have it saved, because it was like something that I used as motivation,
Yeah.
The long, I forget the whole thing, but the thing that stuck out on that postcard to me was when he said, now mind you, this is Exeter, New Hampshire. Hold on. I just need to make a point here. Exeter.
Can you imagine Ramiro up in like the woods?
Yeah. Oh my God, dude. Radio market number. Let me see if it even has. Exeter, New Hampshire. What market?
I'm trying to even imagine where that is.
The middle of freaking nowhere. What market? What
Shout
radio
out to the
market?
people of Exeter. You guys are probably great people.
There's probably one person there, if there's even anybody working there. Radio's so different now. They're just probably syndicating everything. What radio market is Exeter, New Hampshire? I can't even find it. I didn't even know how to find it. Honestly, I don't know. It's in the hundreds. It's in the hundreds. Anyway, so this dude said to me, thank you for, your tape, blah, 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 blah. We're going to fill. I mean, I think he was trying to be nice, but the way he wrote it, I took it as a little bit of a dig, because I was 18.
Oh, I thought it was a positive message. Okay.
Well, no, I think from his perspective, it seemed positive, but from my perspective, I took it as, you suck. Because he's like, oh, we're going to fill the position from within. My advice to you is to get experience in a smaller market. I'm like, a smaller market?
You are the small market.
Yeah, but he said, and get it as fast as possible. I'm fucking 18. I'm like, what are you saying? That like, if I don't get this, if I can't figure this out in the next like couple of months, like I have no career in radio? And so I just remember holding on to that postcard, and I'm like, one day I'm going to meet this guy, and I'm going to show him this, and he's probably not even going to remember sending that, but I'm going to be like, dude, I'm fucking the man now.
Yeah.
And look what you told me. And he's going to be like, you're welcome. But anyway, so I saved that. So I forgot where I was going with this. Oh, so now at one of the people that worked at Jammin', her name was Christine Fox. She was doing like weekends and stuff like that at Jammin', but she was also working at a station in New Bedford called Fun 107. She was their music director, and we were cool. She liked me, not because I don't think I sucked on the radio. I mean, I was just starting out, but she sensed that I had a passion for it. She knew how much I wanted it. So like I think in her head, she was like, even if he's not that good now, he's gonna at least work to get better. And I sent the tape to her program director, and she put in a good word for me. So he called me up and offered me a job, and I was so fucking excited. And the day I started there was the day of my graduation from broadcasting school. So I remember like walking up, and you shake hands and you get your certificate or whatever. And then I turned around and walked out. Like, I didn't even stay for the end of the ceremony, and drove down to New Bedford to get to know everybody and stuff. So I went down there, and I walked in, and I was kind of dressed, not like suited and booted, but if you wear more than like a t-shirt and jeans at a radio station, you're either in sales or
you run the place.
Yeah. So I was wearing like a button-down shirt. I was dressed like, and I walk in, and all the dudes on air were like fucking with me, because they were like, "Dude, you're in fucking radio." It's not like now with cameras and stuff. Yeah. They're like, "You're in radio. Why are you dressed up? Nobody cares what you look like." And I was like, "Well, no, I just graduated from broadcasting school." And they were like, "Bullshit. You were trying to impress us." Yeah, like goofing on me, right? And I was like, hold on a second. And I ran to the car, and I pulled out the certificate, and I came back in, and I was like, look at the date. Look at the date is today. I literally just came here. They were like, oh. So now JR, the program director there, who, by the way, ended up freaking killing himself a couple of years ago, which is crazy.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I don't know why. He put me on the air. He's going to put me on the air June 6, 1995. I'll never forget. June 6, 1995. And
it's around the corner.
Yeah, it was overnights. And he was like, all right, I'll put you on from midnight to 1 o'clock to try you out. And I was like,
an hour.
I know. I was like, it wasn't like a talk show. It was talking up songs.
Yeah.
So I was like, thank you. And then I was so fucking depressed, because I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do in an hour. Like I don't think that anybody, even though I never did it, in my head, I'm like, I feel like the first hour, you're almost like warming up, like you're just getting started. So I remember I walked in for the first show, and this dude Scott was on overnights, and he was like, what's the matter? And I said, like he could tell. He was like, why are you not excited to be on the radio your first time ever? And I was like, JR said I could only be on for an hour from midnight to 1. And he goes, come on, man. He goes, I know JR's schedule. I know exactly when he wakes up, all that stuff. He gets up at 4 o'clock. He goes, I'm going to go take a nap on the couch. You go on until 4 in the morning. Just wake me up at 4 so I can be on the air when he wakes up. And I was like, yes. So I did 4 hours my first night. Big shout out to my boy Scott. And I left the tape for JR, and he was like, all right, cool. You can come in and do like, it was Saturday nights 8 to midnight. No. Saturday overnight into Sunday, midnight to 6. Sunday nights 8 to midnight. He's like, I'll put you on the weekends a couple times. So from that first show, I'm still interning at Jammin'. So I go in the next day, and I got my my first show like in my pocket, because on cassette. And I'm walking around like the fucking man. And everybody's like, hey, what's going on? And I was like, oh, man, I did my first show on the radio. Oh, congratulations, man. I'd love to hear it. Like, being polite. Yeah. And I was like, I got it right here. You could see people's faces like,
I didn't actually mean right now.
Yeah. I got to go do a thing. Yeah. What? They're calling me. I got to go. I'd love to hear, but I got to go back.
You're like, I'll play it on the Walkman. It's right here.
Seriously. So I was doing that with everybody. So now I walk into again. I was still interning for the night show, but I walk in. I would get there super early. I just loved hanging out at the radio station. I would hang out at the radio station all day. I was supposed to intern from 6 to 10. I would show up. I'm not even joking. At 2:00 in the afternoon. The afternoon show started at 2. I'd go in at 2. I'd help her out. I just loved hanging out at the radio station. You know, I'd go to the promotions office, just hang out, watch people absorb shit. That's how you learn stuff. You know. So I went into Lady D, who was doing afternoons, and I said to her, I was like, yo, I did my first show on the radio. And she goes, oh, do you have the tape? I want to hear it. Like, she actually meant it because she was on air. She was an on-air person. And I said, yeah. And she's like, pop it in the fucking radio. We had like a radio, too, to pop the cassettes in. So I'm popping it in, playing it for her. Like, in retrospect, it was fucking terrible. Mm-hmm. But, I don't know, maybe it wasn't terrible for somebody's first show. So as it's playing for her, Ralphie, who I interned for, Ralphie the Night Jock, just happened to walk in the studio. He walks in, and he doesn't say anything. He looks over to the radio, and he walks over, hits stop, hits eject, takes the cassette out, and walked out of the studio. Didn't say shit. And I was like, what's that all about? And Lady D goes, I have no idea. So I'm continuing. Yeah, so I'm continuing to bullshit with her, right? So now, again, remember the studio. The jock can see through the window to the studio behind them. Yeah. I have my back to that studio. So me and Lady D are BSing, and she goes, oh, no. I said, what? She goes, Ralphie's in the other studio playing your tape for Cadillac, who was the program director. And I was like, he is? And she goes, I swear to God, he's playing for it right now. And I'm like, really? And she goes, no, don't turn around. Don't turn around. They'll see you turning around. And I'm like, all right. So now she's fucking with me. And I go, what's he doing? She goes, he's laughing. He looks pissed. I think he thinks it sucks. And then she was like, no, I'm just fucking with you. But they are coming over here. Okay. And I was like, what? And she's like, I swear to God, they're walking over here right now. Ralphie walks in the studio and Cadillac. And I don't think at this point, I know I said hi to Cadillac, but I don't think I like had any sort of conversation. I think he saw me and was just like, intern kid. I couldn't tell you if he interns for promotions, for sales, whatever. If he even like remembered me that much. Maybe every time he saw me, he was like, who's this kid? You know? But he comes in and he walks up to me and he goes, hey, I heard your tape. It sounds pretty good. Do you want to air check? And I was like, yes, sir.
Wow.
Yeah. So now he's like, all right, cool. Next time you do a show, when you come in the next week, you know, find me, we'll air check. So I did my second show, found him the next week. And by finding him, it was like, hey, sir, I'm here ready to air check. And he was like, all right, give me some time. I'm doing this. So, like, let's say if I would get there sometimes like at noon and I wouldn't air check with him till like 3 or 4. Yeah. Because he was busy, you know? Yeah. He was the boss. So, when I finally air checked the second show, he listened to it and stuff. He gave me a few pointers and he goes, that's pretty good. He goes, you know, I have some fill-ins and stuff like that coming up during the summer. Do you want to do them? And I'm like, hell yes. So I'm thinking I'll be on occasionally on a weekend, occasionally on an overnight, maybe. That's it. Maybe like twice a month or something. And he goes, all right, I'm working on the schedule right now. I'll get it to you when I'm done. Yes, sir. I walk back. I go into the studio. Ralphie's there. What happened? I go, he asked me if I wanted to be on air. He did? I said, yeah, like filling in. He goes, oh shit, that's fucking crazy. Like 20 minutes later, Cadillac walks in. Again, this is pre everything, like getting shit on an app. Like my daughter has a job and she can like take a day off from the app or ask, like it's crazy. It wasn't like that. It was a stack of papers that were printed out. Yeah. It was this much because I didn't realize he set up the whole schedule for the summer. He comes in and drops it on my lap and he's like, all right, there's the schedule. And I'm like, all right, cool. And he walked out. So I'm looking and I'm like, fuck, this is going to take me forever to find my name. Moose. I was on Monday through Friday from 2 to 6 in the morning, but still Monday through Friday from June until September, the entire summer. And then I was still on at Phone 107 Saturdays and Sundays. So I just went from nothing to being on air twice a week to now being on air 7 days a week. How are you not going to get better by accident if you're like...
That's literally what I was about to ask you. Like, what do you think that was? Like looking back, so how long ago was it? You said 1995?
This was 95 now, yeah.
So that was almost 20 years ago.
Right.
What do you think that was? Like, do you think because you were putting yourself in that environment, like you said, you would just hang out there if you had like spare time, and you obviously don't want to drive to New Bedford all the time, but you're like, whatever, I need to do this to like.
But you know what? I don't want to, but I would have.
Yeah,
like if they said to me, "There, do you want to be on every day?" Whatever, I would have done it because, and I think that's to answer your question. I think they saw it. You could see when somebody's really passionate and has an energy to like, they just want to soak in information.
Yeah.
You know, like right now I see it a lot with friends that I know that maybe are like tattoo apprentices and stuff like that. And they're just like, I want to be in the fucking shop. Yeah. I don't care if I'm in that shop and just cleaning up and handing, the gloves to the real tattoo artist. Just the fact that I'm there and watching it and experiencing it. You feel like you're picking stuff up by osmosis.
Yeah.
So I think that's what they saw. I think he saw like some talent, like potential, but I think if you have somebody who's like crazy talented, but they're not really, they don't have the energy to put into it, or they're always coming up with excuses to not go into it, that isn't as effective as somebody who's got, on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe they're like a 4 or 5 on the talent scale, but their passion for it and their willingness to learn is like off the charts. And that's what I think I was. So now I'm on, and I was air checking with him every single show too. So now you do the fact that I'm on 7 days a week, 5 days of jamming, 2 days at Fun 107. I'm air checking with Cadillac every show, every jamming show. And I was air checking with JR once a week too. So it's just, you're constantly getting critique and stuff. And I've always had, I'm more critical of myself than anybody could ever be. So like, I've never heard anyone say anything that in my head I've been like, fuck you, you don't know what you're talking about. It's usually like, oh yeah, man, that's true. And I also think I could improve this way or whatever. So when I would go in an air check, I never got my feelings hurt. Yeah. I was always like, okay, I got you. And I started applying it. And I remember Kobe Bryant talked about this one time. He was talking about, so what I did was, let's say I went in and he gave me, Cadillac was good. He wouldn't give me like he wouldn't overload me with things to work on, but he'd give me a few things. But what I would do is I'd be like, all right, I try and work on all the things he talked about, but I would really ultra super focus on one of them.
Yeah.
Like if he gave me like 3 or 4 things, I'm like, all right, I'll try them all out. But one of them I'm going to really go hard on. And I remember Kobe Bryant was talking about when he was mad young, like in his, maybe in his teens, he might've been like 12, that he was like, this summer, I'm only going to work. Like he's going to work on everything, but he's going to super focus on my jump shot. I'm going to super focus on this. So it like when I heard him talk about that, I was like, shit, that's kind of like what I did. That's like verbalizing the thoughts I had in my head. So I feel like I was doing that right. So I'm doing that now. And again, when you have a passion for it and you get the opportunity to get better, how are you not going to get better by accident? So now all summer long, it's funny too. I used to hang out with my cousin all the time. And after I got that schedule, I went to his house. We were hanging out, just BSing, playing video games or whatever. And when I went to leave, I was like, all right, man, I'll see. This is June. I go, all right, man, I'll see you in September. And he goes, all right, Pete, wait, what? And I said, I'll see you in September. He goes, it's June. What do you mean you'll see me in September? The summer's just starting. And I said, yo, I'm going to be on the radio every day. I don't got time for anything else. So I just super focused on that for that entire summer. Like I would, again, even though I was on 2 to 6 in the morning, I would show up at jamming like at 11. Just hang out with the guy before me, watch him, how he did his thing. I would like to see how everybody approached it on air, because each person I would pick a different thing that I'd be like, oh, I like the way this person prepares beforehand. I like the way this person, the way they have energy for what they do. Everybody had like a different quality.
Yeah. That
instead of going like one person take everything, you kind of like nitpick, So I like doing that. So I'd be there, 11 or something, hang out, go on the air from 2 to 6, I was living at my parents' house, drive to my parents' house, on the way, stop off, get freaking McDonald's breakfast, shove it in my face, go to their house, sleep, wake up, shower, get something to eat, back at the radio station at like anywhere between noon and 2 because I had an air check with Cadillac.
Yeah.
After I air checked with Cadillac, sometimes if it was early, I might go back home and take a quick nap and then come back. Sometimes I just hung the whole time, depending, because sometimes he didn't have time to air check till maybe like 5, 6 later in the day, and I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna hang out. And I would help out whoever was on the air and stuff, and then I'd go on the air at 2 o'clock in the morning. That was my Monday through Friday routine. Saturday, basically the same thing because I was on midnight to 6. And the only time I would get a solid amount of sleep was because I was on Sunday nights at Fun 107 from 8 to midnight. I'd get a more of a solid night of sleep because I would get home earlier. As opposed to like 6:37 in the morning, I'd get home at like 1 in the morning or something. So I'd have a little more time to sleep. But that was my routine all summer long. Then when the summer ended, Cadillac was like, hey, do you want to do weekends here? I can't put you on all the time now because everyone's back full time, but do you want to do weekends? And I was like, yes, sir. So I left Fun. I was at Fun 107 for 2.5 months. And then I started doing weekends at Jammin', and I did that for, how long did I do that for? I did that for a few months, and then he actually created a position for me just so I can get a little more money because he saw that I was there all the time. And it's different than now where like they're just cutting people because they're like, oh, the budget. There, it was a cool time. And again, when you see somebody who has a passion for it, energy, they really want to do it. He saw that, and he created me to be the assistant to the production director just so I could be at the radio station some more. So now I'm hanging out again at the radio station during the week doing that and still helping out with all the other shit and still being on the weekends and filling in during the week if somebody was sick or they took a day off or something like that. And that happened until 1997, April of 1997, when I got on nights, baby. I was a 21-year-old Puerto Rican doing nights in the 90s. Doing nights now on radio sucks.
Yeah. No, that was probably the prime, right?
This dude, you were like a freaking superstar.
Yeah.
Because when I went in, a lot of people who were working for this young end hip hop radio station didn't exactly look like somebody who'd be working at a young end hip hop radio station. You know, they were a little bit older. They looked like they golfed, you know, like you wouldn't see them out in the street and be like, oh shit, let's hang out. It was more like this when a lot of them, when people met them in the street, they'd be like, oh, that's you?
Yeah.
You know, and you kind of like, you feel separation, but I'm this 21-year-old Puerto Rican kid doing, everybody felt like, I was telling my wife about this the other day. I said, I think one of the reasons that I clicked was because people would meet me and they're like, yo, I'd hang out with this fucking dude.
Yeah.
We're the same age. He's fun, whatever. And that's what I did. I was always I would go on air, get off. I mean, I went through a stretch where I was doing club appearances 7 nights a week.
Yeah.
It was, but that, again, that's how you get out there. That's how you build a bond with people. There are people now that meet me and they're like, oh my God, I hung out with you at blah, 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 blah. And I don't remember, but I'm like, I believe you.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like something I did, you know? So I did that. But the whole time I was doing nights, I always wanted to do mornings because in my head, I was like, okay, the mornings is where it's at. Like as far as being on the radio, that's like the main event. And somebody told me too early on, they were like, listen, if you're going to succeed in this business, you either want to do mornings or you want to be the program director. He was like, anything else is just not the thing. And I was like, great, I want to do mornings. So I always kind of like put it out there that I wanted to do mornings. And so I was doing nights. And then I eventually got promoted to afternoons. And I was doing afternoons, started doing afternoons in 2000 and re-signed my contract and to continue doing afternoons in 2001. I forget, it was like a 2 or 3 year contract. But a few months later, because like I said, I would always just talking to your friends and stuff. I'd be like, oh, I eventually want to do mornings. One of my friends that was doing nights at the radio station, his name was Stevie. He went to go program a station in Orlando. And he hit me up and he was like, yo, I need a morning guy. Do you want to come do mornings in Orlando? And I was like, shit, I'd love to do that. So I went and talked to the program director. It wasn't Cadillac at the time. And I'm like, I know I just signed a contract. Can I go talk to him about doing mornings and check it out? And he was like, yeah, sure, whatever. You can go check it out. And at the same time, I got a call from Denver, Colorado, and from New York about doing mornings.
New York,
market number 1. All right.
Anywhere like specific?
WKTU.
What's
big?
that?
It's a big radio station. It's like a kind of dance and stuff like that, top 40ish. So okay, just looking at it like that, looking at it from just like a macro point of view without getting into any specifics. You have the number 1 market, New York. You have Orlando, which is more of a vibrant, touristy city, a lot of people, a lot of energy. I'm Puerto Rican. Got to keep that in mind. Orlando got a decent, Hispanic population and stuff. And Denver, Colorado. Out there, Midwest. Rank what you think I would do.
Oh, probably. I would put Orlando 1, New York 2, Denver 3rd, because I feel like Orlando, you'd be a big fish in like a medium-sized pond, and you would fit in the best there.
Okay.
Because New York, I mean, it's number 1 in the market.
Right.
I don't know though. You're like you're like driven.
Okay.
So.
First of all, I was gonna say I never want to be the big fish in the small pond.
No?
I never wanted that.
Really?
Yeah. I'd rather be swimming with the freaking sharks, because that it helps you learn. You learn better when you're surrounded by people better than you. How are you gonna learn if you're better than everybody?
Yeah, that's true.
That was my attitude. So anyway, wrong on all. So the guy I was talking to in New York, I just got a weird vibe from him, and the way he was talking about how the show was going to be set up, I was like, I don't really like this. So New York was the first one I said no to. Orlando, the only thing that happened with Orlando, it was cool and everything, but they never, like, it gets to the point where you're like, all right, well, if I'm going to move, like, it has to make sense financially. I'm not saying break the bank or anything, but like, I'm going to be moving, so I need like a living wage. And they never, all they would say to me was, Orlando's, how did they word it? Orlando's cost of living is so cheap. And I was like, all right, cool. But what are we thinking? Orlando's cost of living. That's all they ever came back to me. Yeah. And I was like, I remember at one point I even said, I'm like, yo, unless the cost of living is 0, right now you're not giving me any type of price.
Yeah.
So I need to know. And they were always like, oh, we'll get back to you. They never got back to me with money. Denver, which to me was just going to be like a throwaway, and just to be like, hey, Denver came, they have the opportunity to go to Denver.
What did they offer you the most?
Denver offered me, he offered me a good contract. I went there and I met with everybody. Everybody was so fucking cool. It was a young staff. They were all hungry. We were all kind of like around the same stage of our career almost. Uh-huh. And the people that I was going to be on the morning show with also, we just like clicked right away. It was the dude's name was Larry and the girl's name was Kathy, and we just clicked. And I was like, I can't fucking believe that I'm gonna choose Denver out of these 3 places. And I was gonna, and I went and at the time my oldest son was 2, and they had it set up. They had trade with an airline, and they had it set up that every other week I could either fly back here for free, or they could fly like my son and my mom out to Denver for free, so we could still see each other. Because that was another big concern I had. That's another reason why I was like New York, I fucking drive back and forth. It's a 3-hour ride, not a big deal, so I could see my son. Orlando, can you guys help me out in that way? And they were like, no, but the cost of living is cheap. So, so Denver, I was gonna go to Denver, and I went to my program director, and I was like, can I get out of my contract to go to Denver? And he was like, I mean, Baltazar was the morning guy at Jammin' at the time. And he goes, I mean, listen, Baltazar's contract is coming up, but we're going to re-sign him. So just in case you're thinking about getting on here, that's not going to happen. And I was like, I never said anything about coming on here. can I go to can I get out of my contract though? I know I just signed. Can you like get me out of it so I can go to Denver? Yeah, I mean, because Baltazar, we're gonna re-sign him, and it's just you're not gonna be able to do mornings here. And I was like, I never said anything. And he said it like 2 or 3 times, and I remember responding. I said, listen, here's what's gonna happen. I'm gonna go to Denver, and I'm gonna get good. And in like 2-3 years, you're gonna call me about coming back and doing mornings here. I was such a cocky little prick. Now I think about it. But anyway, and he was like, all right, well, because we're going to re-sign Baltazar. So I was all set to go to Denver. And then the last minute, Cadillac, who's my program director now, and who was the man who freaking gave me, I would take a bullet for that man. I freaking love that man so much. He stepped in because he was still running. He was running Jammin' and Kiss. He was a program director of Kiss, but he was kind of in charge of both stations. He came in and he on the day that Baltazar, I guess, was going to sign his contract, he called him up and was like, the offer's off the table, and he offered me the contract to do mornings at Jammin'.
Wow.
Yeah and I signed on it, and I started at Jammin'. And another little tidbit in my head was, I remember that a lot of people at the time weren't happy that I was going to be doing more. I just remember the meeting where he announced it, and a lot of people were kind of like, oh, like they didn't believe that I could do it. I remember one guy specifically, I still remember him. He came up and he shook my hand, and he was like, congratulations, I guess. And I was like, all right. I do a lot of mental file stuff away, the way people say certain things, and I kind of use it sometimes as like fuel. I use that one as fuel also. So then I started doing mornings, and I mean, do you want more of the story? Is that not enough of a story? Now I'm doing mornings and radio. It's still, there was a lot of ups and downs after that.
No, of course. I mean, a career almost 20 years in radio. There's ups and downs and everything. I think one thing that's been popping in my head that since you've been talking is it's a mix of literally, like we've already said, putting yourself in the environment. That can go for anything. Right now we're talking about radio. You know what I mean? That could be for whatever your passion is.
It applies to everything. Like if you're into animals, then work as much as you can with animals. Mm-hmm. If that's like, if you know that's what you want to do, why are you going to take a job at Dunkin' Donuts over a job at PetSmart? Mm-hmm. At least the job, you might not, PetSmart might not be obviously your goal, but if your goal is working with animals, okay, let me work with animals on a daily basis, and then I'll volunteer at an animal shelter. Yeah. And then like one of my daughters right now, she who knows if she's gonna end up working with animals when she gets older, but she loves working with animals, and she's going to URI specifically because they had a freaking farm. They have a farm that you could work at.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. And then she she pet sits for people and stuff, and it's clutch for me because every now and then I'm like, I need someone to watch my dogs or whatever, and I'm like, Lily, you want to watch them? And she's all about it. So it's like, I'm guessing she's gonna end up working with animals just because, and it's good because she's just throwing herself in that type of environment as much as possible. Yeah. She was working at a pet store too. Yeah. When she wasn't.
I don't know if you're on like TikTok or stuff a lot or social media, but there's a big thing that always pops up. It's like, like the self motivation things where it's like, oh, like if you want something, you imagine yourself doing it, and then you let it go, and then put yourself in the environment, yada yada yada. And I think what you did is kind of a clear example of that, and that's kind of what people are talking about now. It's literally like, you watched NFL Primetime, and now you're a famous Boston radio host. It's like, that's where it started. That's where it was conceived.
Well, that planted the seed.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny. I think about it like, sometimes I think about it in retrospect, and I'm like, was the seed really planted from like watching wrestling? Because growing up, I would love watching wrestling, and that was the first thing I remember I actually wanted to kind of do as a little kid. At some point, little boy wants to be a cowboy or a superhero or whatever.
I want to be a Power Ranger.
Yeah. And for me, the first thing I remember actually wanting to do, I was like, I want to be like a wrestler. Yeah. But at the time, if it was now, I probably could. But back then, all the dudes were freaking huge.
Yeah.
And I used to love them because, you know, the fighting stuff was cool, but I used to love the guys that talked, and they talked a lot of shit, and they made you laugh and stuff.
Yeah.
And I used to love, and I'm like, wait, maybe that's what planted the seed for me about personality. But I remember I was like, I'm definitely not big enough to be a wrestler. Although if you watch wrestling now, fucking dudes are my size.
Yeah.
It's not pathetic, but it doesn't look as realistic when you feel like you can kick the guy's ass.
Yeah, absolutely.
As opposed to before, you're like, yo, Andre the Giant, he's fucking 7 feet tall.
And look, and also too, like since the way you just said, your career has changed. You're at a different station. You're different hosts. You know what I mean? So even when you make it, quote unquote, like that's not the end.
No, absolutely not. That's another thing too that, you know, that people apply. Well, not everybody applies, but I think that you should, if you really love what you do, is you evolve with it. Because you're constantly working on it. You're not. I'll say to people, you know, this is how you know you love what you do. You have a passion for it. And a lot of jobs, they have a thing called overtime, right? What's overtime? Overtime is you have your regular hours, and then they're like, hey, can you work some extra hours, and we're going to pay you for it. And you're like, all right, I'll do it, but because you're going to pay me for it. That's overtime. When you find the thing you're passionate about, and I've already said this, you find yourself staying extra, showing up early, doing little things on your own to learn and get better at that thing. Not because anybody's telling you to do it, but because you want to get better for yourself. And I told you, I would show up freaking hours early, stay hours later. I used to subscribe to a service that I don't even know if this service exists anymore. Hold on. If it does, I doubt he makes the money he does now because it's just completely different. California. It does. Oh my God. It still exists. Oh, he does a lot of overseas stuff. I see. So it's called California Air Check. What this guy would do was he would just fly around the country and record radio stations on cassettes and then make copies and sell them. Because now you could just freaking go online here. That's not how it was back then. If you want to hear a station in Chicago, you got to drive your ass to Chicago or have your friend from Chicago record the station and mail it to you, you know, or whatever, California, New York. And also, unlike now, now radio's very like McDonald's, like homogenized, like all stations kind of sound the same. But it used to be way different. Like West Coast stations, you'd be like, holy shit, I'm in a different country. And versus East Coast stations versus stations down south versus stations, they just all sounded different. They were very localized. So I wasn't making that much money, but I would still order these California air checks from this guy so I could hear other radio stations and he would also break it up too. He'd break it up by radio stations. He'd do formats. He would do day parts. So you could buy mornings. You could buy just the country format. You could do the hip hop format. You could do whatever. Or you could just do one of the market, which would give you samples of different formats of different day parts. I would buy them all. I'd buy different cities. I'd buy morning shows because I knew eventually that's what I wanted to do. And I would buy like top 40 hip hop form. I wouldn't buy actually, you know what? I didn't think about it. I did buy some rock and country just to hear what it sounded like, but mostly I bought like top 4. So I would get a shitload of tapes just so I can hear, and not necessarily to sound like somebody, but so I could pick something up that people are doing and be like, oh, maybe I could apply that in my own style to get better. So that's what I mean. It's like you do all these things just to get better at the thing that you want to get better at, but not because anyone's telling you to, just because you want to do it for yourself. And again, remember when I told you when I first got into it, I thought it was just like, oh, you go in, you goof around, and you leave. As I got into it, I was like, oh no, there's more to it. But I started doing what I could, the little things. It's easy to do the big things, to grow from here to here to here to here but then you get to a certain point where it's probably like an athlete. Or no, you know what it is? It's like it's a different version of like Olympic athletes, like swimmers and track stars. It's like they know they're not going to get like 5 seconds faster at a certain point. It's not about like getting 5 seconds faster. It's about getting like 0.2 seconds faster. .006 seconds faster, because that's what's going to make the difference.
Yeah.
So it was like at that point where I'm like, I just want to get better at little things.
Yeah.
So I just did that. I mean, I still do that.
You still do that.
I'll do that with like TV shows. I'll watch comedians and anything. I'll just always kind of like look at stuff and go, how can I apply that in some way, shape, or form to what I do?
I think the next stop for you, we got to get you a comedy bit somewhere. We're gonna get you a laugh. I would pay money for that. I think to see an unhinged you, dude, would be nuts.
I randomly sometimes write down stuff that could be like, for a comedy show. One time I went to host a comedy show. Where was it? Where the hell was I hosting it? I know one of the comedians, I knew him really well, who's like a friend of mine, and they were going to have me like open the show and stuff and, bring different comedians in between. And every time I got an opportunity to go on stage, I was like, let me try some shit out. And I would like tell stories and try and be funny. I got some laughs, but I definitely didn't do it like in the right comedy style. But then after I was like, when it was done, I asked my friend who was a comedian, I went up to him and he goes, how did he say it? He basically said like, I know what you were trying to do. And I was like, yeah, I was just trying to see. And he goes, listen, you were doing a pretty good job. You just have to edit yourself. Like he was giving me, again, things that comedians know about, that they all do.
Yeah.
Where I think a lot of people think that comedians just go up there and they're like, fuck it, I'm going to tell you a story and make you laugh. That's not how it works. They work on, and he was breaking it down.
Almost like a science.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And he was breaking it down for me. He was like, when you were telling this story, I could tell where you wanted to go, but the middle part, you could have cut it and gone from here. And I couldn't believe, this is how you can tell like somebody who's really good at what they do. The memory, half the stuff he was telling me, I'm like, shit, did I say that? He was like, yeah, you said this, then you said this, then you said this and this and this. You could have gone from like 2 to 6 and cut out those other things and it would have been more effective. And this and then to transition from this story to this story, you could have done it like this. And I was like, god damn.
Yeah.
So like that, it's just interesting when people, that's why I'm doing this thing, because the way people who are really into what they do, the way they see it is unlike anybody else.
Exactly.
Like somebody who's really into football, I'll watch a football game and I'm just like, fuck man, that guy's really fast. 3 touchdowns. Somebody who's into football is like analyzing the plays and they're seeing it completely different, like different things are lighting up in their brain, whereas most people are watching it and they're like, fuck man, how could you drop that pass, exactly. Like your average fan.
Well, Ramiro Torres, how you end every interview, why don't you take a look into your camera and give us some lessons learned?
Oh, you want to end this now? I was just getting started, Moose.
Oh, he was like,
no. Anyway, so that's basically my story. There's a lot more, but my point is, there's just so much to people. I always look back and I'm like, oh man, if there's so many things I did that I didn't at the time know. I was just doing it because I really loved what I was doing and I wanted to get better at it. And I had a lot of, I don't know if I really got into the downs, but there was a lot of times where I'm like, fuck, I suck, just because I'm on every day. So it was like, that was a daily type of thing. There's not many times that there might have been a time I got off air and was like, oh shit, man, today was a good show overall. I mean, I had some moments where I could have done this better, but it was a solid show overall. But, there are times that you go through stretches where you're like a couple weeks and you're like, what the fuck? I'm going to quit. I'm fucking terrible. And then you go through other stretches. But that's just how life is. And I love hearing people's stories. Like, when we had Tanisha in here, you can check out the Tanisha podcast. Her story was amazing.
That was a great story.
Yeah. The Dane Cook one was amazing
Awesome.
because they got into, they got honest about their ups and downs and stuff like that. So when I get more guests, I want them to be like that with their stories. And if you know anybody, please
hit us up.
Hit us up, social media, email, or whatever. I would love to get you on for the podcast. But okay, what were you gonna ask me?
I was gonna ask you your lessons learned. I mean, that's how you end every interview.
Lessons learned. There's so many. Okay. Keep moving forward. It's something that I tell my kids so much that my son is like, we should get it tattooed.
You told me that the first time I met you. Yeah.
Keep moving forward, because it applies to every single endeavor in life. It applies to relationships, career, when shit gets tough, when stuff is good, when just keep moving forward. That's one. Try to learn something every day. And I'll say that to I'll say that to younger people, and they get very, what could I learn every day? Because they think it's like this big profound thing. I'm like, I'm not talking about fucking learn a math equation every day. I'm talking about like little things where you try something that's not a big thing out maybe differently. Even like something like taking a different way to work or whatever. Just if you just, it's about not going through going through the motions daily. A lot of people, you can see they go through the motions. Mm-hmm. They're just like, get up, do whatever, go to work, go home, unwind,
and then 50 years flies by.
Yeah, and next thing you know, they're like, "Oh, life was it sucked. It went by so fast. You didn't take advantage of it.
Yeah,
take advantage. Try and learn something every day. Even now, I come in every day. I have a little gratitude journal, and I'll write down things that that I want to get done that day, and things that I learned, and opportunities to get better. So keep moving forward. I'll try and hit you with 3. Keep moving forward. Learn something every day. And the third one I would say is be grateful, because the one thing you always have, always, if you are breathing, Moose, I know you're going through some shit right now. You always have something that you can look and be grateful for, and that makes a huge difference. And it's easy. You should definitely, if things are going good for you, you should 1,000,000% take time out of your day just to be like, thank you. Write down a list of 3 things, 3 to 5 things. Thank you for this. Thank you for this. Again, it doesn't have to be profound. Could be anything. That's tough to do when things are tough, but that's when you should do it the most, because there's always something to be grateful for. So keep moving forward, learn something new every day, and be grateful.
Beautiful.
Thanks for the interview, Moose.
Ramiro Torres, thank you.